Hello! It's been a little while. Thank you for being so patient with me and or forgetting that I exist because you have lots of other things to do in your life. For the month of May, I've been really focused in on my contract work so I can stay fed, and it's getting pretty close to done. While I grind toward my grand return, I've been using what little downtime I have to focus on a very critical part of the game. One that doesn't require massive multi-day reworks or brand new systems, but makes the game feel and look better to play. As you've probably intuited from the title of the video, it's the UI. I feel like I've never given the UI the time that it's needed, and part of that is for good reason. With big chunks of the game design being in flux, it doesn't really make sense to polish up a UI for a mechanic that might not make it into the final version. But as the game design is settling, I feel inspired to work on these elements. And one thing about game development is, if you feel inspired to work on user interface, you'd better ride that spark into a wildfire because this stuff is the worst. So let's talk about all the progress and, of course, the reasoning behind it. I'm Dryden Thomas, and I'm developing Disinherited. It's a Victorian side-scrolling action roguelike where you throw, catch, and parry your way through Death's domain to slay the Grim Reaper and claim eternal life, all to spite your father, who cut you out of his will. User interface is communication. Like all types of communication, the tone and the frequency and the content matter a lot. You could easily make the argument that everything in a game is user interface. It's just a bunch of pictures and sounds and words that create a bridge between the player and the underlying systems. I think there's a little more to it than that, but I think it's an especially useful way to think about the HUD. The HUD is the part of the user interface that's on screen at almost all times, and its primary job is to inform the player of important things that are changing. Let's take a little tour of what we're showing here in version 2.0 before we take a tour of the new stuff in 3.0. First, we have these little health and lantern bars. As you can see, these are currently quite ornate and give a sort of three-dimensional impression in their shading. At the bottom, we have a simple numerical readout of the current and maximum values. Next to that, we track the main currency of the game, called Viatica. Across the top, you can see the relics you have equipped and the prayer beads that you've attached to those relics, along with how many empty slots each relic has for beads. Down the left side, you get a similar looking set of panels that show you which holdable items you have. The one that's currently in your hand has a white frame, and the other ones are sort of sandy brown. A lot of this stuff is known to be temporary, but let's critique it as is. First, it's pretty busy. The level of decoration fits with the rest of the game, but at points it's doing so much that it becomes actually harder to read at a glance. One thing that's been called out directly is the crisscrossing on the health bar can sometimes obscure where the actual level is. Another thing that contributes to this busyness is the lack of backgrounds on the frames and around the text. Nothing feels very solid, it's just like a bunch of floating crisscrossing lines. The colors can also be quite bright compared to the rest of the game, especially with lots of beads equipped, and while this contrast can help with readability, here I feel like it's doing too much. I also don't like the way the silhouettes fit together, especially those meddlesome coins. As much as I tried to nestle it into the health bar, it creates this super annoying negative space right here. It feels unplanned. Which it was. Also, this font is something I've felt stuck with since the beginning. To its credit, it does have a good amount of character, it's pretty readable, it somewhat evokes the time period, and the fact that its proportions are on the condensed side makes it pretty useful. But something about it has always struck me as slightly more kitschy or silly than the tone I want. Maybe I'm being too picky, but 6 years as a graphic designer makes you dissatisfied with literally every font. So I took a screenshot of the game and I started feeling around for a design that felt more like one object instead of a bunch of separate pieces. At first, I was thinking of returning to this will and testament idea and have the HUD be made of paper and ink. But I felt like a pale piece of paper would be too intrusive to be on screen all the time, especially against the darkness that frequently covers the edges of the screen. I wanted to preserve some of the ornate nature of the old health and light bars, so I thought of something else with bars. Victorian ironwork, which is already a common design element in the game. Now I can tone down the frame color to a blue tinted gray instead of this bright brass, and it can be detailed without overshadowing the important information. I found this new font that I like, for now. It's this simple but old-fashioned feeling serif typeface called Codex. I gave the numbers their own homes, with the max values at the top and the current values larger at the bottom, because those are the ones you want to check on most often. The bars that show the levels are unobscured, and the money is finally cozy right there in the middle. In the backgrounds of the numbers, I did a little subtle color coding, but you really don't need it. The health bar has a heart, the light bar has an eye, and the viatica has a little coin with a V on top. I also got around to adding a little juice to the bar movements. When they change, instead of just popping to their new value, they glow bright to catch your attention as they smoothly move to their new target. I actually opened Desmos, which is like a graphing calculator, to make these simple quadratic easing functions from scratch. Off the bottom of this apparatus, we hang the frames for the holdables, which are now doing a lot more work. So there's this concept of item durability in the game, which I really haven't talked about that much, but each item has a certain amount of HP, and as you throw them against the walls or use them, they run out. Unlike a certain Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild I won't name, I thought it would be pretty nice to let the player see their item durability, so I put a bar at the bottom of this frame. Many of you who have been watching from the very beginning may have forgotten this detail, but there's also an item that has ammunition, the cannon. This little readout in the top right will show you how many shots you have left in weapons, more of which are going to be added, by the way. Okay, then across the top we've got our relics. This needed to look a lot cleaner, so I had to sacrifice the hanging beads. Instead, you get these circles on the bottom that fill up when a bead is attached to the relic. Initially, it just showed the main color of the bead, but I figured to make it more colorblind friendly, I'd give them each a unique little frame too. These don't need to be instantly readable. The more important thing for the player is being able to see how many empty slots you have. I did want the current character build to be visible on screen at all times though, because I think that's really helpful to streamers and audiences. There's one more HUD element that needed to be brought in line with all this though. The boss health bar. The original one was a little rough in my opinion, and also I thought the boss's health display should be closer to the action. With the top of the screen and the left side occupied, the bottom made the most sense, and that's a pretty traditional choice. I kept a little reference to the original scythe though. And let's not forget about the font. Codex, the one I mentioned earlier, is really good for reading longer portions of text and numbers, but I wanted something with a little more pizzazz for titles and headers and names. I was doing a little research for inspiration on will and testaments from the Victorian time period, and I was very pleased to learn that they took a lot of inspiration from older Middle Ages style of calligraphy. It was hard to find that balance of calligraphic but not too frilly, but I found these nice readable black letter fonts that share the screen well with Codex and also with each other, which was very useful for this next piece, the item description box. These semi-transparent black boxes are functional and minimalist, but just so bland. With the paper will and testament theming, there was much more fun to be had. Now, when you approach an item, you get this little unfurling animation, and the paper sways slightly while it's open. Plus, with a bigger canvas here, there's more space for all the information, and I could partition it so that it has room to breathe. Ironically, the most time-consuming part of this entire thing was this symbol right here for viatica. I wanted something that said, this is a currency symbol, while fitting into the rest of the typography, which literally took 5 drafts and 2 hours to get right. Another thing I've been wanting to change were these status notifications. It's kind of annoying to get drain, clear, popping up all the time. Or my least favorite, can't pocket that. While these were super simple to implement with text, I literally borrowed my damage number script, and they were also very clear to the player, they're pretty grating. An icon is a lot less intrusive. So here's the icons for lantern refill, lantern drain, lantern clear, unpocketable, safe, agonized, chained, and dodge. Speaking of the safe icon, the safe zone effect that appears when you get close to an item is super important because the player needs to feel, well, safe while it's active. The old effect was kind of blah and very heavy-handed, I would say. So I replaced it with this particle system that feels a lot more alive and also includes the safe icon in it. I also like the way that it comes in. It feels kind of like a soft hug. I've also done a little work on this pause menu, making these buttons feel more like buttons. I also partitioned out the inventory with these frames, and it's looking a lot better already. And both of them use this new paper background, which I think looks a lot better than the old one. The last little bit was replacing the dialog box, which, if you remember, was just like the item description box, this bland, semi-transparent black square. We've got the paper background, we've got the new font, and lines of dialogue also now have the speaker's name at the top, and overall, this just has a lot more character in my book. I've also been planning out a massive redesign of how dialogue works in the game, but that's gonna have to be another devlog because it's gonna take a while to implement. It might be a few weeks before you see me again, but once I come back, it's going to be full steam ahead, full time, disinherited until this whole entire game is done. I personally can't wait. I've missed this a lot, so thank you for being here and thank you for watching. And a very special thank you to all of my channel members who have stuck with me during this little dry spell in the Ascended Lighthoof tier, EMIL SKOV, and in the Reaper Council, AJHAVOK. Have a wonderful day and I will see you in the next one.